Hello and welcome to Insiders, a podcast all about the world of television, hosted by me, Peter Fincham.
And me, Jimmy Mulville.
This is the podcast, as you know, for people who love television and want to know a bit about what goes on behind the scenes in show business.
Behind the scenes in show business.
Yes.
It always sounds so much more
It
glamorous.
sounds a lot more salacious than anything that we're about to say.
Exactly. Yeah, well, I've been behind the scenes.
You've been behind the scenes in Vancouver.
I have.
Come on, tell us about Vancouver.
So, well, I went. Actually, it was a quite nice trip because I was going to visit the set of a new thriller.
This is your Jed Mercurio thriller.
Jed Mercurio has written a new thriller, which has been announced, so I can talk about it.
Yeah.
Called Trinity, and but that's all I can tell you.
Yes.
If I tell you any more, Netflix will have me killed and then make a documentary about my death, and it'll be a big, So but it was amazing. I mean, Jed has written a brilliant thriller, and it's full of twists and turns. And
Jed likes a twist and a turn, doesn't he?
He's the master of that.
The big twist in a Jed script would be if there were no twists and turns.
Oh.
If you challenge him with that, say, Jed, just for once.
Yeah.
Everybody's who they appear to be.
He'd look
the
at you.
Story's going ahead in a straight line.
He'd look at you blankly and then say something laconic in his Birmingham accent.
Okay.
No, the most exciting thing about going onto the set of an American production is the food.
Yes.
The craft services.
Yes.
Over here, I remember once working with a bunch of American actors who did a show called Episodes, and they asked me where the craft services were, and I pointed to a tea urn and a packet of biscuits. Whereas over there, honestly, hot dogs, bagels.
But actors, am I right in thinking actors in America, I mean, I know you were in Canada, but actors in America, Canada, are treated both better and worse? Because I've discussed this with actors before who said they treat you really well on that front, but you have to drive yourself in the morning.
Oh, and the horror of that.
The horror of that. In other words, whereas here,
oh yes,
we send cars for them.
Yes.
I'm talking about people playing
and then
leading
treat
parts.
them like shit.
And then feed them. Well, no, we must be careful what we say here because some of our location catering support is really, really good by people we really like. And
oh yeah,
I don't want them to poison me next time I'm on set.
It's the lunch is okay. What's about craft services is different, and for those of you who want to know what it's like from the inside, it's a tent. Inside the tent, it's basically a groaning board of really nice snacky food, but it's there all day. So they're constantly topping up the bagels and the pancakes
and
the
soft
hot
fruit.
dogs.
A lot of soft fruit.
And lots of fruit. And you can just graze all day.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go anywhere near why America is the most obese country in the world, because that's for a whole different podcast.
On that point about America being the most obese nation in the world, I've been watching a show, I'm not sure I'm going to get the title of this right, called The Long Narrow Road to the North.
Oh yes,
like
I
that.
nearly watched that last night, but
it's good. I mean, it's very good actually. It's also very, very gruesome in parts because parts of it is, as you probably know, take part on the building of the the Burma Railway,
Yes.
the same as Bridge on the River Kwai, that railway. And in order to film those scenes, they've got the actors who otherwise appear kind of with fairly ordinary physiques. They've got them to slim down to look as if they're on the point of starvation.
Oh.
And you watch that on screen, and you may know more about this than me, Jim. You watch it on screen and think, how have they done that? How have they done it? In other words, have they done it literally by taking 6 weeks off and not eating anything, which would be, asking an awful lot of the cast, or is there an element of special effect here? Is there is it makeup, AI? The sort of ribs are all protruding and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm saying this to say I'm ignorant in this.
Well,
how do you create the impression that a well-known actor is suddenly so?
You know how they do that? They starve. No. Actors love.
No, I know actors love
shaving their heads, growing their beards, putting weight on,
but this
dieting to the point of death, so they can do the interview saying, "I starved myself for 3 months. I lived like a tramp for 6 months, so I could play a homeless person." I mean, it's like.
But this isn't only the leading actors who get to do the interviews and sort of brag about it a bit. This is lots of non-speaking extras.
It's a mystery, Peter.
Yes, it's the magic of television.
But my view is there are enough very skinny actors out there to cobble together a few dozen looking like they've been working on the Burma Railway.
Okay, so shall we have a go? And let's go into our very first question, which is in the form of an envelope, which Owen is going to pass.
Come on, Owen.
Oh, he's dropped his papers on the floor.
Rattle his tin. Come on, Owen.
Here we go. And the words are a smorgasbord of news from new broadcasting house.
Oh, dear.
This is the BBC. This is about the BBC. They've been much in the news in the last couple of weeks. BBC. They remain much in the news.
It's a roundup of stories about the... Now, we've always said that we aren't going to... Because it's a go-to place, the BBC, isn't it? You think, well, you know, you can always talk about the BBC. There's always something happening in the BBC, but there does seem to have been a kind of a conflation of quite a few things that have happened over the last few weeks. Should we start with Gaza?
Yes, absolutely.
So there's been a review?
There's been a review by a man called Peter Johnson, who's the BBC's Director of Editorial Complaints and Reviews.
And let me stop you there.
Okay.
The Director of Editorial Complaints and Reviews. What the F is that?
Well...
What does he do?
He
Hello? Complaints?
Well, if there wasn't a Director of Editorial Complaints and Reviews...
There'd be a complaint about that.
It would be a complaint about it, and there'd be nobody to deal with it.
Did you deal with someone like that when you were running the BBC?
I don't remember this particular
So they've added that job in?
Well, you raise an interesting question there, which is the number of people who work at the BBC. And you might be surprised to find that in the last 10 or 15 years, it's gone up.
Wow.
There are more people working in the BBC than there were.
Have you got any figures on this?
I have got figures on them. Hang on a minute. Where are they? Now, first of all, a caveat, Jim, because these are headline figures and who knows what you know lies behind them. It's possible that the actual figures are higher because it might not include people who are not technically on the payroll but are contract staff and so on.
Yeah.
But these are published figures. So in 2010...
Yeah.
So I won't go with the in-between ones. I'm just going to go with the headlines from 15 years ago and today. In 2010, 17,242 people worked at the BBC.
Wow.
And the figure today is 21,508. So that has gone up by 4,000.
You're good at maths.
It's about 20%, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I find that a really interesting thing because commercial companies... This is the difference between commercial companies and publicly funded companies. Commercial companies shed fat.
Yes.
They try to slim down.
Channel 4 famously got rid of 200 people last year.
And by the way, Channel 4 aren't a truly commercial company. They're a sort of quasi-commercial company. They don't have a share price. They don't have an obligation to make profits to satisfy investors. But commercial companies, from time to time, because there's a downturn or for normal reasons of maximising returns, try to shed fat and remain lean and mean. Arguably, public-funded companies don't have the same motive. But bearing in mind the pressure the BBC are under over the renewal of the licence fee and the charter and, wanting to continue fully funded into the modern age, whatever the mechanism for that is, you might think that one thing they would be doing would be comparably slimming down and trying to make sure that they're lean and mean. But those statistics don't suggest it. So... yes, I didn't know there was a BBC's Director of Editorial Complaints and Reviews.
Well, he's obviously one of the jobs that's gone in to swell the numbers.
Well, possibly, and maybe that.
But that's the old joke, isn't it, about the BBC? Is that when the BBC musical chairs and the music stops, you put a chair in. Is that you? But publicly funded bureaucracies often do this. They add layers and layers of these kinds of safeguarding. I mean, we had a meeting a while ago now, not with the current regime, where we were where we were discussing a show they commissioned, and it was a drama, and literally we had about 15 people in the room, mainly from editorial policy, lawyers, and the rest of it, and you thought, we haven't even started yet.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, let's go back to this particular issue.
Gaza, Peter Johnson.
So Gaza, and then there's a whole Greg Wallace and John Terrell.
The much-needed Director of Editorial Complaints and Reviews said.
So basically, the BBC doc Gaza: How to Survive a War Zone. He has found, and he's internal, that it did breach editorial guidelines on accuracy by failing to disclose that the narrator was the son of a Hamas official.
Yeah.
The review found that Hoyo Films, who produced it, bear most of the responsibility for the failure, but it also said that the BBC bore some responsibility and should have done more in its oversight. I mean, that's interesting in itself.
Yeah.
That the BBC... I don't know what the fair division of responsibility is, but what as you know, and I know, running independent companies, we do not have these massed ranks of editorial complaints and editorial policy people. So the BBC is much more fully staffed to spot these things coming than a hard-pressed independent production company. But the BBC itself here is saying it's mainly the fault of the independent production company.
This is the news department, isn't it? So what's the news department said about this then?
Well, so this is where life gets more complicated again there, because Deborah Turnis, the CEO of BBC News, has made a controversial point. She says we are owning where we've made mistakes, we're finding out what went wrong, acting on the findings, and we've said we're sorry. But Deborah Turner's, on a point of more substance, I suppose, made a point that is much more controversial. She pointed out at an all-staff meeting at the BBC that there's a difference between the political and military wings of Hamas, and added, I think that's an important point of detail that we need to continually remind people.
What is the difference?
Well, what I do know is that the British government doesn't make that distinction. No. Hamas is simply a prescribed organisation.
Why would she say that, Peter?
So, well, I think we're now... we are now in a world where people are calling for people to go at the BBC, and that does extend upwards to Tim Davie, where you've seen kind of politicians and other commentators saying
it would reduce the wage bill.
Should he consider his position and so on? And when things get as squeaky as that, life does get a little bit uncomfortable. Now, we've sat here on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, I think, and you said, he's not going to go, is he, after whatever the thing was then? And I remember saying, I don't think he is.
I don't think he should go.
And I stand by, I don't think he is.
No.
But I think the BBC is in the crosshairs so much at the moment. I mean, what it doesn't need is for something else to go wrong.
I can't move on with the podcast without getting this old joke that's lodged in my brain. Can I share it with you?
Go on, share it. Share it with the listeners.
If
it's an old joke, you probably told me.
It was the old joke about... and it's unfair on BBC these days because it isn't like that. But when I started, it was, how many people work at the BBC? About half of them. And I think that's very unfair because I think the people who work at the BBC work really hard these days. And often they're in the barrel being kicked to death. But as if that wasn't bad enough, of course.
Yes.
A bit of light relief. We had Greg Wallace.
Yes, we did. Yes.
But that was, I mean,
and more recently,
we're coming on at the end of all this now.
We had John Turode.
Well, that was recently.
Very recently, yeah. And it's sort of, I mean, I hate to say it. If I were, so let's sit back from whatever Greg Wallace may have said or done, and in ditto with John Turode. At the point at which you decided to let Greg Wallace go, there's quite a strong argument for letting John Turode go anyway. Yeah. So editorially, there's quite a strong argument for saying let's have a new presenting team. Take an obvious example from the not too distant past, when the Great British Bake Off went from the BBC to Channel 4. It lost its presenting team.
Sue Perkins and Mel Gidroch.
Mel and Sue, both of whom we know and love, and acquired new presenters, and it's gone on being very successful. It wouldn't actually have been better for the show if one of Mel or Sue had left, leaving the other behind. It was better to have new presenters. Yeah. So, ironically,
although John Turode and Greg
Wallace... I'm not
Wallace...
suggesting for a minute that that's why John Turode has been let go.
No.
Because we don't know the details of what happened and what he said or didn't say. We've read about it, but we can't comment on that. I'm only saying from the point of view of running Masterchef, a clean start has quite a lot to be said for it. Another interesting thing, Masterchef is worth 228 million euros to Banijay last year alone, according to its annual report. That's a lot of money, isn't it?
It is. It's a very, very successful format. It's sold in over...
You know how things work. When you get a headline number like that, is that profit? That can't be profit to Banijay.
Maybe turnover?
Turnover. So turnover, that's a sort of slightly meaningless number unless you actually focus on what the margin on it is. But that's obviously in many countries.
Well, I think it does. Yeah, it's sold, isn't it, broadly across the world.
It's an extraordinary story, Masterchef, because it existed before. It was created by a man who I know called Frank Rodham, who also, odd mixture of things, directed the movie Quadrophenia
and owns the rights to Our Wiedersehen Pet.
Well, you're absolutely right. That's all of that is absolutely true.
Yeah, he's quite a Renaissance man.
But Masterchef, in its original form, ran for a number of years and then sort of came to an end. And then it was brought back in its current form, which is the world-conquering form that it's in now. And who would have known that all those years later, it was worth nearly 300 million euros a year to manage it. Even if that is only turnover, that's a very big slug of business, isn't it?
It's not chopped liver. Well,
it's
actually,
chopped liver.
Chopped liver does appear on the show.
You could buy a lot of chopped liver, chopped liver sautéed nicely in onions with a little bit of seasoning. But and I suppose you could say, even if what had happened was fatal to the UK Masterchef, on the face of it, it would have absolutely no effect on Masterchef in any other country at all.
I wonder what.
If Masterchef Germany had some scandal about its presenters, in that sense, television sort of remains quite a parochial business.
Do they have it in Germany?
Well, I'm guessing. But I mean, obviously,
you and I went walking in Germany, and
we didn't see any Masterchef.
And every time,
you're quite right. They need it in Germany.
And every time we went into a German town, we looked for an Italian restaurant, because once you've had a bratwurst and a dumpling, you've kind of done the whole thing.
They need Masterchef.
Whenever you ever been said, whenever anyone
said, let's go eat in German.
Let's go and have a German. Let's go out and have a German tonight.
Hang on, we're getting to another podcast again. But no, what I'm saying, it was a more general point about television is let's say there was a scandal about the presenters on MasterChef in Italy, where they do have very good food. Over here, we wouldn't give a damn. It wouldn't infect MasterChef in the UK.
No, each territory is hermetically sealed from the other. I absolutely agree. But what do you think Greg Wallace will go on to do?
YouTube. I'm guessing. There will be people.
There's a new show out called about throwing celebrities into shark-infested waters.
Oh yes, there is. Yes,
but I don't think any shark would swallow that.
Did you prepare that one earlier, Jim?
No,
it feels
just
like
to get to me.
Yeah,
it gets me.
We've got a team of writers back at Hat-Trick who say, "I've got to come up for Jim in the podcast this week."
Now you give me an idea, because they lie around the offices that haven't got used to you writers, waiting for someone to come in and say, "Write some jokes."
Go in and say, "Can we have some of your offcuts for the podcast?"
There's another story from the BBC, which I think is slightly what you're talking about, how many people work there, is that there was a rumour, wasn't there, in broadcast last week, that the BBC, that Tim Davie was talking to big tech in America about outsourcing a lot of the ancillary, the support services of the BBC. It wasn't going to affect the programme commissioning or the creative aspects of the BBC. And then I turned up at a very, very glitzy party, a big showbiz party. Oh, in fact, it was your 30th anniversary. And I met somebody there. I won't say who they were, whether they're a man or a woman, but they were in the know at the BBC. And when I pressed them with my investigative journalist hat on, they smiled rather quixotically and said, "Well, I couldn't possibly comment, but you're not far off the mark. That it is true that they are going to do that. They are going to
work out who you mean."
Oh, I'm not. You're going to go through your guest list now, aren't you? As indeed will be Peter Johnson, the editorial complaints person. He'll insist on having your guest list now and interrogating. People will be dragged into offices saying, "Have you been talking to Jimmy Mulville about what we're doing?" But it makes sense, doesn't it?
Of course it does. But this is another tendency of large organisations, which is to think they've got to do everything themselves. And I mean, there's a parallel here, is there not, with programme making? Because for decades, the BBC assumed, since we need to broadcast programmes, we must make all our programmes. And it's only in the 80s, as we've talked about before, when you were running Hat-Trick, I was running Talkback, that it occurred to them, or it didn't even occur to them, it occurred to somebody else completely, it occurred to the Thatcher government. They don't need to make their own programmes. They can buy programmes in from outside. And initially, the BBC reacted to that with some degree of horror. Of sort of feeling, why would we want to do that? We make programmes. But of course, large organisations, whatever they are, whether they're in television or anywhere else, are generally fitter and healthier and better if they do themselves the thing that they're best at and then buy in from elsewhere what somebody else is better at and can do more efficiently. So this sounds entirely logical to me. You don't want the BBC to be, if you like, competing with tech giants to do what tech giants do.
But this is what I mean, is a story like that where you think, well, that's the BBC, that's Tim Davie looking to the future and thinking, I need to get on the bus here with technology and invite it into the BBC in a more fundamental way, bake it into the DNA and outsource things we don't need to do anymore, which is what obviously AI is good at. But the truth is they get criticised for that. They then get criticised for doing this because jobs will be lost. And so in a way, if you work at the BBC, if you're at that level of Tim Davie and the other senior officers of the BBC, you're literally in a no-win position.
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't, on a whole host of issues, which is why we've often talked about, we're both glad we don't work at the BBC. And ultimately, you and I are natural supporters of the BBC. We believe in the BBC, and we wish well to those at the BBC who are grappling with these incredibly difficult issues. And, you know, certainly in my time at the BBC, and you say in normal times at the BBC, impartiality is in news is making sure you're kind of well balanced between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, with a bit of a nod to the Liberal Democrats and Reform, or whatever the political thing at the moment is. But you know, where did we come in this podcast? We were talking about Gaza and Israel. Think how many times more complicated impartiality in respect of that conflict is. That's what the BBC are grappling with today.
But the microscope under which they're held, I mean, if you think about how news is presented in America, if you flip, which I sometimes do in America, between Fox News and MSNBC, it's like you live in two different countries. There are two different versions of the same event.
Yes.
With the BBC, I mean, it did actually publish in its annual report that despite all the noise about Gaza and Hugh Edwards and Greg Wallace, is that the proportion of UK adults who think the broadcaster is effective at providing impartial news and current affairs rose to 50%, up from 45%. And there's a similar rise in those saying the BBC provides accurate news and current affairs, up from 59 to 63%.
So that's a relatively rare at the moment bit of good news for the BBC. Suggests they're doing a good job, but does it not also suggest that the opposition, the other sources of news, which are spreading further and in different ways, are the exact opposite? And so people value impartial news, even if they don't always get the impartiality quite right and make mistakes, like with this Gaza documentary. And of course, the news is being broadcast 7 days a week. And I heard something on the Today programme this morning, an interview with a former defence spokesman for the Israeli government, and he, you know, essentially listening to the presenter on the Today programme doing his absolute best not to reveal any sort of partiality, and yet doing the proper editorial job of interviewing him and not taking at face value everything that he said. That's really hard. And I suspect the reason those stats have gone up is that people would rather see people trying to do that and trying to get it right than people not even bothering to try.
And what disturbs me is you listen to the Today programme first thing in the morning.
Well, why does that disturb you, Jim? Would you rather I was watching Good Morning Britain?
Because there's a survey out that says that people who are addicted to news in the morning are more prone to depression. And I don't want you getting depressed on this frigging podcast.
Well, you've depressed me now by pointing this out.
And so I've now decided that in the shower now, I don't want to...
Hang on, we're getting to
I don't want to paint a picture.
No, please.
When I take my morning ablutions, I now listen to the Kinks. I listen to the Kinks.
Yes.
The greatest love songs. Spotify, if you put in happy songs, they give you a whole list of happy songs to wake up to.
Oh, I find that quite depressing.
That is depressing, actually.
No, I know what you mean, but I'm not a slavish listener to the Today programme, but I do listen to the Today. I listen to the Today programme until about 12 minutes to 8.
Okay.
And then the minute somebody mentions Thought for the Day, I think, I'm out of here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know. Are we allowed to say this? Because we're talking about a sacred cow here. If I were the controller of Radio 4, which I'm never likely to be,
no,
I would cancel.
You're too young.
I would cancel Thought for the Day. I so don't want some
sanctimonious old twat telling us how to live our lives.
Your words, not mine.
No, I quite like Thought for the Day when it isn't too gaudy.
Well, it often isn't, because the definition of what, you know, how...
Oh, no, we can't. No, we can't talk about...
Yes. Exactly, you only need the thinnest link to organised religion to be...
Yeah.
But nevertheless,
I wonder how many hardline Catholics they get on.
You're getting a sermon.
You get Anglicans on, but Anglicans don't require you to believe in God anymore. They're happy just for you to turn up, I think.
So we're going to move on to another subject, and this one is not an envelope from Owen. Owen can put his feet up for this one because we've had an interesting question from one of our listeners, Craig Hannington.
Craig.
Thank you for listening or watching, Craig. I don't know whether you're watching it on YouTube. You might be. With Colbert and The Late Show disappearing in May next year, why do you both think that a similar late-night format like this has never really worked in the UK? There's been several attempts. I think the last one on terrestrial was Jack Doherty on Channel 5. Well, that's a very interesting question, Craig. Although you could frame the question in a slightly different way. This is what politicians do.
Yeah.
We should ask this question instead, which is a bit more generally: whether the chat show, why the chat show, whether it's late night in America or whether it's more often a weekly thing in the UK, it's not what it was 20 or 25 years ago.
I was in America when this happened, when they were talking.
And was it a big story?
When Stephen Colbert was basically, CBS announced that the story was due to financial restrictions and due to the performance of late night, which is actually it's been struggling for a while in terms of the amount, because these late night shows were created, some in the 50s, but more latterly in the 80s and 90s. They go out very late at night, which is just culturally not what we do. They go out at 11:30 at night.
Yeah, when there's no original programming going out in the UK, we can't afford it.
No.
So yeah.
So they put these original shows out, and they're kind of, in many ways, they're opinion formers. Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel have been two of Trump's fiercest and very funny critics over the last, since he came to power in 2016, And here's the backstory here, is that CBS are about to try and sell to a company called Skydance. The president can stop that.
Why? I don't understand that, Jim.
All right.
Why can the president stop one company buying another in America?
Owen's just informed me in my earpiece, which I don't have, is that it's the Federal Communications Commission.
Is that like the monopolies?
Which is under his purview, yeah.
Oh, it's because it's communications.
And so he can have an influence there and thwart it, or get his team to thwart it. So they want to make that go through. They've recently, ABC, I think, settled with Trump
$16 million. Yeah.
Because of an interview they did, a perfectly legitimate interview, which he claimed was edited in such a way that it made her look good. And they've settled. They buckled and they settled. So there's a much wider. Yeah. We'll get onto the talk shows in a minute, but I think the wider issue in America is that.
Yes.
So you've got ABC taking the knee in front of Trump. You then got CBS. These are huge organizations. CBS saying, we'll cancel Colbert. Because it isn't making any money. But why now? It's number one. It's the number one talk show, late night talk show. It beats Kimmel. It beats Fallon and Seth Meyers and the others. So it's doing as well as it can do in that slot. Why now? Well, why now, I think, is because they're trying to say to Trump, don't get in our way when we want to sell to Skydance. And Trump went on to Truth Social, or whatever the hell he calls that platform he's on, straight after he heard that Colbert had been fried. He said, I'm glad that Colbert's been fired. His talent was lower than his ratings. So it's personal.
Let's turn to the other half of this, which is chat shows.
Why don't they do that over here?
Why don't they do that over here? And you could argue that
they've tried.
They've tried it, and it's never quite worked. But far from it being likely over here, the direction of travel is in the opposite direction. That you don't need to go very far back to be in a world where you assumed there would be a big chat show on BBC, a big chat show on ITV, a big chat show on Channel 4. They'd all compete for guests and for audiences. So I'm thinking of an era where you had Graham Norton, Jonathan Ross and Alan Carr. And before that, you'd have Michael Parkinson on the BBC, Michael Aspel on ITV, Clive Anderson on Channel 4 that you used to make that show. Mm-hmm. So you'd have a kind of three...
every channel had one.
Yeah, every mainstream channel had one. And now most of the year only one.
It's Graham Norton.
That's Graham Norton. Yeah. And Graham Norton is by no means on every week of the year with substantial gaps. Jonathan Ross, now, when I was at the BBC, we got involved in a kind of auction for Jonathan Ross's services because I think ITV tried to nick him, and he was running. He was absolutely kind of at his zenith there, at his peak, and so it became a public scandal. The amount paid to Jonathan Ross to retain his services. That kind of stuff doesn't go on now, does it? Channel show. So what is it? Is it that that chat shows aren't as valuable to viewers or broadcasters, or is it that the people who appear on them, who are mainly appearing on them to plug things, Hollywood movies or whatever, just don't think they matter as much because there's so many other ways of doing things?
But also, do you not think that when Michael Parkinson did his interviews, he had on his shows people who were huge stars, who actually were often slightly kind of enigmatic figures. I mean, there wasn't any social media. There wasn't the ubiquity of the platforms where people were constantly pumping out information about themselves on holiday.
Yes.
Because now you feel as when you see somebody, well, are they?
You know everything there is to know about
and
them.
even when you get real celebrities on, I mean, and Graham does get the biggest ones available. He'll get big American stars, but you kind of feel slightly jaded that you've seen a lot of them before anyway.
What it seems to me Graham does brilliantly is that he creates a lovely, warm, funny atmosphere. It's a very funny show. But it's one that those celebrities are completely comfortable in. They're never going to come out badly. They're never going to be embarrassed. Now, you remind me of this. When you did Clive Anderson's chat show, some of the most famous moments on Clive Anderson's chat show are the exact opposite, where he did embarrass guests. And I don't think that would ever happen today.
Well, famously, he did the Bee Gees, and
Yes.
he discovered his research, which was very good. Dan Patterson was the producer, very good producer, and they found some research that one of the early names of the Bee Gees, Les Tosseurs.
Is that really true?
And well, according to and they all nodded, and Clive said in a jokey way, "You'll always be tossers to me." And Barry Gibb said, "I've had enough of this guy." He got up and walked off, and the other two Bee Gees who were on stage looked a bit bewildered and then followed Barry.
Yeah.
And off they went. And Clive looked a little bit bashful, tried to get them back on, but it was a great TV moment.
It was a great TV moment. I mean, we could debate long and hard. Was that a good moment for Clive Anderson?
Well, what happened? I mean, I hope
you don't
Clive,
want to lose your guests.
I hope
on
Clive
the whole.
doesn't mind me telling the story, but we went to see Peter Salmon, who was the new controller of BBC One. He wanted to have a chat. Oh dear. So we got in the car and we went for the chat. And this is when he'd been poached by Alan Yentob to go on to BBC One from Channel 4. And the debate was, how edgy can you be on BBC One? We were edgy on Channel 4 because in those days Channel 4 wanted edgy talk shows that were slightly different to the ones that you'd see on the BBC.
Yes.
So we go into Peter Salmon's office, and Peter Salmon does that thing of saying how much they value you, which is always the beginning of a meeting where they are about to fire you. And Clive wasn't quite getting it at the time. And then what he did, he said, I want you to change tack, Clive. I want you to do a show at the end of the week where you sum up what's been happening on TV, a kind of magazine about TV. And on the way back, we took the meeting. On the way back in the car, Clive said, what was that about? I said, they fired you.
Yeah.
That's what's happened is they've ended Clive Anderson's talk show and they've given him this other show which didn't work.
And they're probably only given a pilot.
And no, we did a series. And actually, Clive was brilliant. He did a very funny job.
Well, he's a brilliant guy and he's a very funny man.
But they didn't, but they, and I think it was a mistake by Peter Salmon from doing that. I think Clive was doing a really good job and was getting really big guests on. But he was a new controller. He wanted to do something different.
I would agree with all of that. But I guess the point I'm making is in the past, you've seen chat show hosts able to spar with their guests in the way that Clive did. And there's been a ready supply of guests, so it's kind of been fine. Maybe the Bee Gees walked out, but I bet you still had a full show the next week with guests who were willing to come on Clive's show. The balance of power has shifted so much that to have a viable chat show, you've got to have guests. And to have guests, you've got to make sure they come out from it really well. And I know that in my kind of latter years at ITV, when we had Jonathan Ross against Graham Norton would tend to get the better guests.
Well, he's warm.
Jonathan's
brilliant, but he's got edge.
Jonathan's brilliant, but he's got edge. There was another reason again, which people might not quite appreciate this, that Graham's show went out on a Friday night.
Yeah.
Jonathan on a Saturday night. Film studios would rather have their act out on a Friday night than a Saturday because it's going to affect the weekend box office and the whole weekend's ahead.
Right.
By Saturday night, it's slightly less valuable to them. So Graham would tend to kind of clean up and get all the best guests. But even then, you had a duopoly, and I can't remember whether you still had Alan Carr on, and you've had other shows that aren't exactly chat shows, like the Last Leg, and shows that have guests, but they're not chat shows in the conventional sense. But arguably now there are fewer chat shows on British television than there've ever been.
So
in our kind of adult lifetime.
So going back to Colbert, with what you said, probably quite rightly, well, he'll go onto YouTube because, let's face it, he's got a huge audience, certainly for a YouTube audience. He'll get sponsors, he'll be able to afford it. It's not an expensive show. And there is a show on YouTube, which I think is brilliant, hosted by Zach Galifianakis, the American comedian, called Between Two Ferns.
Right.
Have you seen this?
No.
So he gets guests on, and he basically messes around with them. It's a bit like, the Mrs. Merton.
Yes.
It's a bit like the Kumars that we did.
Yep.
We did for you.
Yep.
And so it gets guests on, but it does something slightly different, and it does really well on YouTube. So I'm wondering whether, like we.
So is this entire genre migrating to YouTube? And
if you look at what we do,
things like chicken shop dates and things like that are great things for people to go on, to come out well from, by participating in a joke, but not trying to reach a broad mainstream audience on a Saturday night, Friday or Saturday night.
Yeah, and also people are becoming more and more used to, for example, watching podcasts. So people now, I'm sure people in their millions are watching this podcast as we speak, Peter. But the care homes across the country are tuned to it. But the truth is that I think that they're cheap to make, you see, and that's the whole problem with YouTube, isn't it? How do you get premium content? Well, you get a premium content talk show on more cheaply than you could a drama.
Yes.
So maybe there is a future for the talk show on YouTube.
But let's just go back to the question from our listener, Craig. Thank you very much for writing in, Craig. He's talking about the late night, every night of the week chat show. Why don't we have it on UK TV? Or is it, is it true that the last attempt was Jack Doherty? By the way, when the Jack Doherty show was on Channel 5, who was the person who emerged from that? Graham Norton. He was the holiday replacement for Jack Doherty, and of course he's still the king of chat shows today. But I can't see any sign of anybody trying that again. There was an ITV show, The Nightly Show, which tried the kind of guest host thing for a number of weeks. Didn't really work. I think we're talking about an age that is, if it hasn't already passed, is passing.
I mean, after the news at 10, I think the audience anyway is dwindling fast. So
yes,
unless I think your idea about the YouTube thing is I think a distinct possibility. You'll find it'd be interesting to see what happens with Colbert. If he pops up on YouTube, I think that could point the way for a whole new genre.
Do you think there'll come a time when a linear channel, rather than trying to invest in original programming after the news, will show something that was made for YouTube? In other words, the production values of a chat show. You probably know more about this than I do, because you've made chat shows at Hattrick. You need a studio with 250 people in it. Although, of course, ironically, those American chat shows, talk shows as they call them over there, have much smaller audiences than that. They're in quite tiny studios. Nevertheless, you need a studio audience. You need proper lighting and all the kind of stuff, and it costs whatever it costs. Whereas YouTube, you can stick a couple of cameras on a podcast and you've got sort of program. Will these things merge weirdly into one? And will we be watching content that was made for YouTube on what we now still call linear channels?
Absolutely. I think because YouTube is actually on big TV screens in the home. It is the most watched channel on TV screens. So you've got a generation following us who are used to now watching content on YouTube. And I go back to this talk show that Zach Galifianakis did, who's a bit of a genius comedian, I think. He's very funny. But his guests are, Jimmy Kimmel, John Hamm, Bradley Cooper, Charlize Theron.
So these are
Conan O'Brien,
big bookings
Ben
for
Stiller.
any talk show.
Well, because he's cool.
Yeah.
And they want to hang out. So if you create a cool atmosphere on any show, like people like to come on to Have I Got News For You because they like being on Have I Got News For You. It's not because we pay them fortunes or they're going to suddenly increase their value. It's a cool thing to do.
Yes.
So I actually think that if someone can crack it, and maybe Expectation will be the first to market with this, is if you find the right host and the right hook, I think it'll be well worth doing, because it's not a fantastic capital outlay at the beginning of that journey. And I do think that if you strike pay dirt, you appeal to that feeling it's a cult. it's something that we found.
Yeah.
And I think advertisers love that. If you can sell to advertisers that we've got a very specific demographic that come to us and it's a very intense viewing experience, I think you're in business.
But do you think the UK is the same as America there, except that we don't have Joe Rogan equivalents quite in the UK? Or do you think it points to some cultural difference between the two countries, that if you're Joe Rogan, you know who your audience are, it's huge, it makes you an absolute fortune, $100 million or whatever he makes a year, but America's a very big market. Is there an equivalent kind of audience you could broadcast is even the word, on YouTube, that could make some podcaster as rich as Joe Rogan in the UK? For some reason, I think that's unlikely, but I'm not quite sure why.
But let's use a different comparison. Could you create a talk show that gets as big an audience as the Graham Norton show? Well, actually, maybe you could.
Maybe you could.
I mean,
it raises the question: what is? I don't even know what these days it probably begins with the 1.5 million.
It's around 2.
It's around 2,
I think.
Yeah.
I mean, Graham Stewart, the producer, may ring up and argue with us, saying it's actually, when you aggregate, which I always do, I say, well, when you aggregate the catch up and the whatever it is, it's double that. But the truth is that
I just want to say a word to Graham Stewart, 'cause he's a friend of mine and of yours, Graham. If you are listening and you've got this far through the podcast and we have misstated, then do let us know and we will correct it next week.
Or edit it out, depending how embarrassed we are.
If in fact you only get 800,000 viewers, then why not let us leave it as it is at the moment?
But no, you're right. I think what you've hit upon there is that, are the audience now ready for YouTube content and the production values of YouTube content on a big screen at home? Absolutely.
And are there new chat show hosts in the UK waiting their wings? I know they made a one-off. I think it was a one-off with Claudia Winkleman, who you would think sort of admirably qualified and equipped to be a brilliant chat show host. But I don't know. Again, Graham Stewart, if you're listening, let us know. Are you going to do more with Claudia Winkleman? Is she the new Graham Norton? Are they going to run alongside each other? Is there an evolving story of chat shows in the UK? Because on the face of it, it's a slowly declining story of fewer than there used to be and still getting fewer. That's all for this week. Thanks very much for listening. Are there any questions about the world of television you've always wanted to ask? If so, send them our way and we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, you can get them on our socials or by email, the usual way. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please do check it out on wherever you get your podcast and tell your friends.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.